Hello and welcome to Newsworthy Stories with Jacqueline Jimenez. We're looking at the world of philanthropy at work as the Community Foundation of Broward was able to bring together a room full of philanthropists to hear about the state of the arts in Broward County.
The Community Foundation of Broward stirring up conversations about the state of the arts in Broward County. This room was filled with philanthropists looking to hear where the community is supporting the arts, what's needed most, and what's ahead. It's all part of the Community Foundation's Private Foundation Roundtable.
Happy to have everyone here today. The purpose of our Private Foundation Roundtable is a chance for private family foundations that are based here in Broward to meet with some community leaders on a specific topic and learn about it so that this can enhance their grant making right here in Broward County. And today's topic is art and culture, so it should be a really good one.
On the panel, a diverse group of organizations who, through donations from philanthropists, grants, and government funding, support art projects in Broward County. Their job today to share what's working and shed light on areas of concern.
I actually know all of the panelists, so I can promise very comfortably that you will have a lot of good information shared, and it will also be entertaining.
Looking at being able to attract state and federal funding, where do we see our community having some success, and where do you see other communities maybe having more success that is an opportunity for us to grow in that area?
The county governments have been pretty consistent in their support of the arts. Now, when you start talking about state and federal funding of the arts, it's really important to understand how that funding comes to our communities. The amount of state funding that comes to Broward is generally a function of what arts organizations apply to the state, right? And so on one hand, if our arts organizations are applying to the state, then obviously the state can't fund what's not here. When the Parkland shooting happened, and there were also at least one hurricane, maybe two hurricanes that came through that year, a lot of money was diverted from the arts. So the state of Florida actually went from third in the nation for arts funding to 48th in the nation. And we recently got back up to sort of the middle of the pack. And with a lot of the federal infrastructure dollars from an ARPA funding and things that came through the state, they were back up to essentially full funding. But that's the hope, right? And it makes it really hard for arts organizations to do any sort of preparing when one year they get 150,000 and the next year they get 80,000 and the next year they get 1,500 and then the next year, right? You can't really rely on the state. Federal funding is a lot through the National Endowment for the Arts, and or maybe the humanities if arts organizations can make a tie-in with the National Endowment for the Humanities.
The big change happened when Phil came in. Phil basically and his team looked at the current structure, the way grants were done, and was able to restructure it so that it would really help the institutions plan with multiple year support. And that has made a big difference, and also changed some of the pots of the money so that it's actually higher than what it was when I first came here almost 10 years ago. It's still considerably less than what Miami or I'm sure Palm Beach is getting. And when you look at it, those are our direct competitors. And although we have as good, or I would say even better programming in Broward, we really are at a disadvantage from our immediate competitors, if you want to call it. They're our neighbors, and that's who we're competing with. The most important thing all of you can do is write your legislature. Write, call. They're hearing from the other side. You need to get it across how important this is. And we have proof from Miami and Palm Beach how the government support, local government support, has transformed those counties. So thank you, Phil, for what you're doing and for the private support we're getting. But that being someone has worked in Palm Beach and Miami, I can tell you where our struggle is here.
You look at the three performing arts centers in the counties that Bonnie mentioned, and they all have different makeups of contributed support from government, private sources, and then earned revenue. They're all very different. And I usually like to say that it's just an expression of how a community chooses to create similar outcomes in their community. But just running through them quickly, the Arts Center in Miami receives 25% of their budget from contributed sources, and they receive about 10 times more government funding than we receive here in Broward. Up in Palm Beach, they receive about the same amount of government support, but as you can imagine, in Palm Beach, there's a much higher level of philanthropic support from the private sector. So in Broward, we rely a lot more on earned income from the Broward Center itself, from the operations we have. We have one of the top 10 busiest theaters in the country, which is sort of representative of that drive for earned income to be the thing that supports maybe lesser contributed income in our community. But it just, those three examples kind of give you a sense of how communities right next to us support the arts in their community and how it can be different. Back to Phil's point, when you get to the state and the federal level, I think the key is to be looking for sources that become sort of structurally available through, whether it's a tax, portion of a tax or something like that, that can come to the arts in general in these communities without being necessarily subject to the line item every year that some people will support, some people won't. You get a veto, you know, the whole thing's over, and it fluctuates significantly at the state level.
To even get some of that funding from the state, super competitive, and from the federal government, super competitive. Just thinking from the perspective of an artist and as a leader of a smaller arts organization, thinking about the challenges. It is what everyone was saying, just about kind of creating this idea and this environment for sustainability. Because as a small organization, that is how you are able to grow and to be able to be a continued valuable organization and force in the community. Having the ability to show that you can do this work that is important.
I was also thinking about some of the local cities have added cultural officers and are building city budgets with some funds for the arts. And I think while that's existed nationally, that's kind of new for Broward County. Okay, so if we take the same concept, local, state, federal, but we talk about private funding, philanthropic funding, corporate sponsorships, other grant-making organizations, where do you see that we've had success, and where are you seeing other communities have more success that we need to study more, emulate?
Start.
You can start. Well, did you see him grab that microphone?
So on the corporate side, so we have two aspects for Funding Arts Broward. We are certainly reliable on family foundations, the Peck Foundation, the Ingham Foundation, very generous and supportive of what we do at FAB. We did start a couple of years ago a corporate membership level, because at a corporate membership level for our organization, the dollar amounts are more in terms of individuals. So for us, we were very ambitious, looking at all the different categories of businesses here. But what we found is it was difficult because we don't find big corporate presence here in Broward, and for a leading corporation to really come in for funding. The banks have been very generous. We've had PNC Bank. Northern Trust has been a terrific partner for us for a number of years. But we find it difficult to keep corporate partners involved with the arts. And I do think because we lack kind of depth in terms of corporations that have that kind of dollars to spend. They could be subsidiaries or they could be branches of major corporations. So that's our challenge at Funding Arts Broward.
One of the things that has happened, it used to be the CEO would say, yeah, I want to be supportive of that, and then money would come. Now it's pretty much goes through the marketing or a community outreach department, and it has become much more transactional. So in many cases, it doesn't count as a contribution anymore because there's a transactional response. One of the major problems for all South Florida arts organizations is the lack of endowments. They're all relatively young organizations. So what that means is that we're all left to the raising operating expenses, program expenses, and endowment at the same time, which means we as the administrators are basically starting from zero every year for operating. One way of getting around that was to get multi-year support.
We also just started our own endowed fund for the arts here at the Community Foundation 2 years ago, so it's a journey and it's an uphill battle, but
Right.
definitely I do agree with Bonnie, there's so much more support in Miami and we need to get our piece of the pie here in Broward.
I guess, I'm up here in a sense to advocate for the little guy in his experience. And I think, what Bonnie was saying is it affects organizations like mine as well. I think when you think of individual philanthropists and private foundations and corporations, one is what is considered art and who decides what that is, right? And so if individual X or grant-making organization Y, is looking at it like that's on one side of there's a person that is making the determination of what is allowed to be called art or what is worthy of funding, worthy of being supported in these various ways. And so I think that conversation around expanding what we are thinking of as far as a responsible use of funds, right? So to support, say, the NSU Museum, for some people that is, if it's in a museum, then it's art, right? But we talk about like individual artists creating murals, in communities, or doing a public performance of a Shakespearean play in the park, or it is a poetry recital or cipher, right? Are those things considered art? Is the value seen in those experiences in a way that they might be seen in other ways?
I will just say everything that Bonnie said.
Yes.
was right. I'm not going to repeat it. I'll say that on the corporate side, she mentioned that corporations tend to be transactional. I'll take that a step further and say they're looking for measurables that affect them tangibly on the marketing side of the equation. They're looking for on-site activation. They want to take over our entire space and make it theirs, which makes it really difficult to look at the money they're offering for that support versus what we're going to have to give up in terms of brand, time, energy to get them to come back and do it again. So that's becoming increasingly difficult, and even when they have a philanthropic side to their organization, that is often getting a great deal of influence from the business side of the equation. So it's all really kind of one package that we try to create interesting opportunities for them, and we've had a lot of success, but there's a lot that comes with it.
Okay, let's switch gears a little bit because we've touched on COVID a little bit. And so I was thinking about the challenge of growing your audiences and especially cultivating audiences through our youth. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how you're having success engaging the youth in your programming. And then I also put a couple notes in here. How has COVID impacted that? Working with the school district. This also sparks in me the discussion Brent brought up about mental health. So I guess here, let's talk about the youth, your programming, and then maybe any other topic that sort of ties with youth. Who wants to go first? Derek.
So we're, what we do is a lot of art education. We do some of it in schools where we have teaching artists have residencies in schools. A lot of that is through my relationships. I'm a former educator, and so a lot of that is through my relationships with certain schools and principals and teachers. Going directly through the district, is not the easiest avenue to get things done. So sometimes having someone there, and what we've seen is, like you mentioned, COVID. There's this huge educational gap that occurred during COVID. and we see it. The idea of just having a young person try to write a poem and being in the 4th grade and not be able to spell simple words. So yesterday we just did a Seas show. So Seas is a program between Broward Schools and the Broward Center. And so we had a theatrical production at the Broward Center yesterday for over 800 students. And what was interesting there were the conversations that were happening after the play. So like the kids were super engaged. They was asking questions. They wanted to come up and talk to the actors, you know, and talk to one of the teachers. She was saying like, yeah, because this is for a lot of them the first time they've been out in public like this in a long time, having that interaction, but also like to be able to sit. Many of them hadn't sat in a theater before. Some of them, this is the first time sitting in a theater or for the first time in multiple years. And I was emailing actually with the teacher this morning, and she was just thanking me for the conversations that they were having with students on the way back to school, and how, you know, the students were inspired. The students, you know, were having conversations around some of the things that they witnessed in the play, and how, you know, they were able to relate to those things, and they felt seen, and they felt heard in the conversation that they were seeing in the plays.
The program that Darius was describing, that Art Prevails participated in, provided a performance for students, part of our Seas program at the Broward Center, 30-year partnership with Broward County Public Schools. And one of the reasons it works is because the school system was bought into the Arts Center from the very beginning. They made a commitment of dollars, which established our Amaturo Theater, our smaller space, as an outside resource classroom of Broward County Schools when it was built. And so over the years, we've been building out arts-based programs for the schools based on their needs. We reach over 100,000 students a year through these programs, working with artists like Darius and his team to create programs that are tied to curriculum. And the curriculum could be anything from math and science to social and emotional learning, which is an important part of defining the effect arts can have on students and their development. Last thing I want to add is, Darius was talking about the chatter after the show. I wish there was a way we could measure that, because there's part of me that believes that that's an indicator of one of the most important outcomes we produce, which is something they saw in the show that resonated with them, that they wanted to share with others, that might make them think differently about how they're conducting themselves, how they're tackling a problem in their life. Those are real outcomes that are produced by things that are on our stages that we don't have a really good sense. So when we go to try to tell the government why we matter, and we show up with something like that, I mean, they might get it, but what's the measure? What is the tangible outcome here? I took my own son to see Dear Evan Hansen. If you're not familiar with the show, this is a story about teens and social media, all the challenges that come with that. A student on the spectrum trying to navigate that world, and a mother trying to help him through all that. So it's what's happening now in our society, and it's on stage, and it's a moving story. And I got in the car with Garrett, who was, I think, about 14 at the time. And we're driving home, there's kind of a long silence, and then he finally says, I need to talk to Mom more. Now, you know, if we can put things on our stage that cause that kind of a conversation on the way home, I mean, I wish I could just capture the conversations in the cars on the way home from the theater and track the outcomes that it's producing. I know they're good. I know it in here. But when we try to talk about the value of the arts to a community, that's a big part of it that's difficult to just measure.
So I have 2 data points, and they're really more on governance of a nonprofit organization in the arts. And 2 examples. So Funding Arts Broward, we fund performances of organizations here in Broward. Any kind of music, dance, theater, that was our history, and it continues to be that. We introduced art education for children 2 years ago, and that has become so successful, and we're doubling that because what we find is so important at a young age to be exposed to art, so that who knows where they'll wind up. I think similar to what Bonnie has talked about. Where will they go? They have this appreciation and sensitivity. So it's all about who you bring onto the board. So we brought 2 people on the board. One was named Dan Katz, and Dan Katz has head up the theater group in Fort Lauderdale High School. So it's a 4-year program, and so certainly sensitive to student activity, student involvement, and now he is he's connected all the schools in the county, and he's bringing 200 of those students that have aspirations for theater and putting them through some of our productions to witness. On the other side was about diversity. How do we bring more diversity in addition to youth? Cultural diversity. We recognize that Broward is certainly diverse in so many ways, and we see only one small segment that are historically in our theater. One of the programs is I'm Telling You My Story. It's for young African American youth that have a chance to really vocalize what they're experiencing in life. And so those are ways that we see as from a governance standpoint of how we can help an arts organization get more diverse, which truly is an objective of our board.
Philip, do you want to add anything to this? And also I wanted you to then maybe transition to talk about individual artists and what are some of the specific programs maybe you've led or you see that we need to look at embracing in our community?
So really what I'm trying to do is we've done a lot of sort of processing the process or trying to lessen the amount of paperwork or the questions. I mean, sometimes I think we create questions just for the sake of having questions because we think the more questions we make someone answer, the more we're able to justify giving them the money. And if we have 21 questions instead of 20 questions, then yes, now we know, kind of to Darius's point, that it's a good use of funds and we can justify it. So, you know, I also at the same time have auditors to deal with and am accountable to the public, so I can't just throw money out the door without some kind of process and accountability to be able to say, this is what they said they were going to do with the money, this is what we approved, and then this is what happened, right? And that's kind of how I'm approaching a lot of revisions in our process, is to say, what is the least amount of paperwork and process we can have in order to get the money out the door the quickest to support the broadest amount of programs and artists. Because I think by growing that, we like to look outside a lot for our identity, but I think our identity and the stories we need to tell are here. We just need to invest in them, and we need to do it in a way that doesn't create more barriers than not.
All right, Gary.
Yeah, so one, I just want to say that I'm humbled and proud to be a recipient of those programs which Phil is talking about. So thank you for that. Exciting. One of the things that individual artists just need is time. There's missing a point, because maybe I don't have the idea right now, the exact thing that I want to create for you in 3 months. I might not know exactly what this thing is, and so I can't necessarily tell you this is what you're going to get in 3 months. But if I have time, where I don't have to be concerned about, am I going to be able to pay my rent? Am I going to be able to eat? Is my mind and my ability just open for me to try things, to explore, to sit outside, to listen, to read, so that I have some information in order to create and to produce that thing which is going to potentially change people, impact, inspire, increase quality of life, and all these different things. And so as an organization, right, if everything is tied to a program, it becomes difficult to grow, because you're just connected to just, I have to produce this project and this funds go to this project, as opposed to, oh, I'm building, helping build capacity with my staff and be able to do and produce major projects in it.
Well, first of all, that was a great panel. Thank you very much. But I wanted to speak to the funders in the room. You know what? A recurring theme here, something I hear over and over again, is we're all interested in the arts. That's why we're here. And artists need unrestricted, recurring funds. So does everybody else, by the way. So doesn't matter who you're funding, they need unrestricted recurring funds. And at the Community Foundation, we have the ability to just click on PhilNet and say, I am going to give Business for the Arts X number of dollars for the next however many years.
I was going to say, you make very good use of this.
I do. Actually,
That's our money we're about.
Way back earlier when you were talking about the gap between getting the information out there from the smaller organizations to the funders, and other than in this venue, I'm just wondering if you have any ideas about how we could give smaller organizations such as yours a better platform to talk about the benefits and the power of what we do.
Convene the rest of your funder buddies, you know, in the spaces and say, hey, we're gonna host a what, you know, maybe it's like a speed dating kind of opportunity or thing that where you get to know, so we don't have to, you know, spend a whole lot of time. You come, I may not know everybody that you know, so you can help facilitate those connections, and then because really talking about it is one thing, but when people are able to see it, that and make that real connection, and they're like, then that's the value.
Appreciate so much about your efforts and how you've shared about the diversity and equity, and it's so important, and I've enjoyed being part of some of those performances. And Bonnie, you were speaking about how you're engaging students with exceptional abilities and kind of bringing them in more and tailoring some of your programs. So I would love to hear from you, Bonnie, as well as the rest of the panel. What strategies have you used in your organizations or in some of the funded organizations that you work with in terms of that inclusiveness and helping individuals, adults and children who have differing abilities engage more with the arts?
A theater production, we partner with Slow Burn Theater Company and our Amaturo Theater. Take one of the productions they're already doing, and we make adjustments to the production to accommodate the neurodiverse community. So that these are often people on the autism spectrum that have particular sensitivities to flashes of light, loud sounds, those kinds of things that are always part of performances on our stages. How can we adjust the performance so that it's one that they can enjoy with their families? And with funding support, we also found it was really critically important to keep the ticket prices low. Because despite everything we've done to ensure that they might make it through this performance and enjoy the whole thing, there's still a bit of a gamble on the part of that family, right? Because they are not absolutely sure they're going to make it all the way through. So to plop down $60, $70 for a ticket is going to still seem like a significant gamble. We keep all the ticket prices in the 20s, $25. There's less at stake when they come in. We create the right environment, and we've really opened up the world of theater to a whole sector of our community that really didn't feel it was accessible to them before.
The Community Foundation can play a really important role in providing a platform and a place for people to learn. So I think for us to be able to elevate the nonprofit community, and today hopefully elevating knowledge around the art community, and also to help our private family foundations and private philanthropists be as impactful and as wise in their investments in the nonprofit and in our philanthropic community. So I see community foundations as being able to play that role and to really be a convener and a source of good information and learning. So I hope today provided that for everybody, and I look forward to the next one and the next one as well.
For more information on the Community Foundation of Broward and the resources it offers to philanthropists, nonprofits, and professional advisors, visit the Community Foundation online at www.cfbroward.org.